Too Much Information is a production of iHeart Radio. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Too Much Information, the show that brings you the secret history and little-known facts behind your favorite music, movies, TV shows, and more.
We are your blended family of banality, your step-siblings of stories, your Marcias of minutia, your Ann B. Davises of the deep dive.
Speaking to you live from the confines of a 3x3 square grid, my name is Jordan Runtagh.
And I'm Alex Heigl.
And folks, gather around because here's the story of a man named Brady, a lovely lady, and 6 adorable kids. We're going to talk all about the way they became the Brady Bunch. It's certainly on the Mount Rushmore of beloved classic sitcoms, despite the fact that it's kind of not a good show. But I say that with love because, look, I was raised by Nick at Night, and I will go to bat for anything that was part of their programming, especially during the block party summer era. The Brady Bunch was one of those shows that I think I rarely sought out, but I watched a lot simply because it was there. I call this the Sprite phenomenon. It's what you drink at the birthday party when the 2-liter bottles of Coke and root beer are empty. Because, I mean, did you know anybody who actively seeks out Sprite?
I sought out Sprite. Sprite was my go-to hangover cure.
Oh, well, okay.
Sprite causes alcohol to be broken down more quickly, metabolized more quickly.
Is that true?
According to some study in Japan.
That I just made up.
No, I actually did look this up. Yeah, so my go-to hangover cure was coconut water and Sprite.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
You could have gone with Sierra Mist.
That kind of flies in the face of my theory, but Mellow Yellow. Mellow Yellow fits more into the Brady Bunch aesthetic. So we're going to go with,
yes.
We're going to rebrand this as the Mellow Yellow theory.
Okay.
Anyway, the point stands. Brady Bunch just sort of absorbed it. But obviously there are super fans still to this day, nearly 54 years after it premiered on ABC. You know, it's a dose of nostalgia that goes down easily, but it's unique in that its nostalgia isn't tethered to the generation who came of age with the Brady kids. Show creator Sherwood Shorts had a very simple explanation for why this show continues to endure across multiple generations. He said, "I think it's because the stories are drawn from a child's point of view, which is rare in television history." Heigl, I know we talked about this earlier, and I correctly deduced that this was not a big one for you, but surely you must have some thoughts or memories on the Brady Bunch, even just through cultural osmosis.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just rerun blocks. Again, like just on TV when you're a kid and you don't realize that death is coming for all of us, and you just while away long hours watching idiot stuff. No, I actually, my most enduring memory of the Bradys is the Surreal Life.
Oh, yeah.
When the one Brady fell in love with that mean model lady.
Adrienne Curry.
Curry. Yeah, America's Next Top Model season 1 winner, Adrienne Curry, who was just chased off of Twitter for saying mean things about a woman on the biggest show in the world right now. Anyway, yeah, I remember watching her and who is it? Not Wayne Knight.
Christopher Knight.
Peter
Brady.
Yeah. And then he seemed like such a nice guy on that show. Actually,
I think he is.
He was like the only
I think
one.
they all are fairly nice.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I read. And the movies, right? They came out when we were kids. When did they reboot that?
They came out when we were kids, but I think 95 is when the movie came out. We're not going to go really touch on the movies in this episode too much.
Why is that?
Because they were more of an affectionate parody, I would say.
Damn, Shelley Long was Carol Brady. Gary Cole was Mike Brady.
Christine Taylor was Marcia.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I disqualified it because it was a parody and not like a
reboot,
an
a proper
authorized
reboot.
Continuation of the series. But also I was lazy because there's like 23 pages of Brady Bunch stuff to get through, and I just didn't need another thing.
Yeah, that's true. I should stop derailing this. Go ahead.
But yeah, an important part of my appreciation for the Brady Bunch was not only these movies that were kind of in the ether, but the irreverent Nick at Night promos that sort of lovingly teased the show. There was a cover of the Ramones' "I Want to Be Sedated" that they changed the lyrics to make it "I Want to Be a Brady." Do you remember this?
No, that sounds terrible.
It's like, "I want to be a Brady." It's great.
I want to be a Brady, a Charleston in the living room, and Zach Grace in the yard. I'd cruise around in the Brady wheels, life will not be hard. I want to be a Brady.
Pretty good, medium funny. And there was a whole recurring bit where all the cast pretended that there was a long-lost Brady sister named Phoebe, and it was just like a little like in between shows bumper bit, but they had the whole cast there and they committed to it. And I appreciated that. It kind of imbued a little bit of a reverence into this very straight seeming, sunny pop cultural entity. And to me, it was almost like what Mystery Science Theater 3000 did to those old bad movies. It was, the Brady Bunch was just so rigidly straight laced that it almost seemed subversive, which is something that I very much connect with too. Maybe it's because sort of how I see myself. But yeah, the Brady Bunch movies in the 90s also played with this. The show was just mocked for being so supremely uncool, but it was done with affection. And you got the sense that the cast were in on the joke too. So I appreciated that. And also, as is so often the case, the more squeaky clean the production, the more raunchy the stories behind the scene. It's the Mickey Mouse Club rule. That's my second rule that I made up off the top of my head in this episode, and we are 5 minutes in. And, I got to say, it's worth noting I'm a member of a blended family myself, and I'd argue that there's something aspirational and maybe even inspirational about the Brady Bunch. Despite its lightweight status, we forget that this family, especially the kids, went through some sort of traumatic upheaval, death, divorce, they don't really dwell on what in the plot, before they arrived at this very cozy suburban Shangri-La. As you recall, that's the way they became the Brady Bunch. So, damn it, I'd say they earned their boring, slightly lobotomized lives. After whatever hardship that came before, I think that the fact that they found peace and their lives were happy enough that every problem could be solved in 20 minutes or less, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to see, especially for kids at a time these days when families look all kinds of different ways. And, for 1969, it was quietly radical that this blended family could be just as boring and lame as a traditional nuclear family. So I think that's powerful.
Fair.
Thank you. So with that in mind, let's press on. From the weird pseudo-incestural relationships between the kids and the cast, I probably should have put a little space between my heartfelt sentiment and incest. I should have put that one later in the deck. To the time that Mike Brady was such a pain in the ass that the show's creator planned to kill him off, to the several ways that the actors nearly died while shooting the show, the episode that Greg Brady filmed while high, the real-life feud between two of the Brady sisters, the curse of Cousin Oliver, the insane Brady Bunch spin-off drama, and the New York mayor who gave Carol Brady an STD, here's everything you didn't know about the Brady Bunch. So here's the story.
You have to stop using that.
The story of the Brady Bunch began in 1965 when television producer Sherwood Schwartz came across a small article in the LA Times. It was just a tiny filler piece, some 4 lines long, and it said that in that year, 1965, 31% of all marriages involved people who had a child or children from a previous marriage. And Sherwood Schwartz later said, "It was just a statistic, but to me it indicated a remarkable sociological change in our country. 31% is approximately 1/3 of all marriages. That's a huge statistic." And Schwartz, by this point, was already a television power player, having created Gilligan's Island, which was a hit at this time. And this article gave him an idea for a new show about a blended family. And he wrote a pilot script that he called Yours and Mine, and he shopped it around to all 3 major television networks. Yet all 3 networks wanted to make some major changes to the plot. One network wanted to delete a scene where the kids accompany the newly married parents on their honeymoon, which admittedly is kind of weird, and the network executives deemed it unrealistic. And then there was another network who didn't want a marriage at all, but a prolonged courtship, which kind of makes a certain amount of sense. Weddings could be a huge mid-series draw, and it seemed a shame to blow this gimmick on the first episode. The episode where Jeannie from I Dream of Jeannie married Major Nelson in 1969 was a huge ratings getter, for example, although many fans, including Barbara Eden, a.k.a. Jeannie herself, thought that the marriage ruined the show by eliminating the sexual tension. Also, see The Office with Jim and Pam. After they got married, I tuned out. Most people tuned out. But anyway, I digress.
Cheers. Do you know that Sherwood Schwartz went into television because he couldn't get into med school because there were quotas on the amount of Jewish students med schools could accept?
I did not. I knew his brother wrote for
Bob Hope. Yeah.
But yeah. Wow.
But that is wild. We have anti-Semitism to thank for the Brady Bunch. As you were.
Sherwood Schwartz didn't want to make any changes to his script, so he basically told the networks no thank you. And luckily for him, he was flush with Gilligan's Island bucks, and he didn't have to do anything he didn't want to. So he shelved the idea. But then, 3 years later in 1968, United Artists released a film called Yours, Mine, and Ours, starring Lucille Ball and Henry Fonda. And this movie told the story of a widow with 8 children who married a father of 10. And this film was a huge success, becoming, I think, the top grossing movie for United Artists that year. And one of the side effects was that suddenly television networks were extremely interested in Sherwood Schwartz's Yours and Mine pilot about blended families again. And he'd say years later, this movie had done my pilot for me. He decided to change the very similar title so that audiences wouldn't confuse it with the movie. And for a time, it was the Bradley Brood, which I hate. Yeah, I know.
Especially because, like, David Cronenberg's The Brood would come out like 12 years later.
Yeah, the Brood. Yeah, I don't like the Brood. It morphed into the Brady Brood, which I also don't like. And finally, the Brady Bunch. But the premise of the show was still too close to comfort for the producers of Yours, Mine, and Ours, the movie, who threatened legal action against Sherwood Schwartz and the Brady Bunch production for seemingly jacking their script idea. Schwartz responded by turning over his script and outline for the series, which he'd written years before the movie came out, thus diffusing any threat of legal action, but the show was plagued by scurrilous rumors that something, untoward had occurred.
How does that work? You were a screenwriter or a major. How does that work? Did you have to log it with the WGA to have it count as a intellectual property, or can you just produce something that you carbon dated or had notarized when you wrote it and were like, I did
or
this?
Put in an envelope and mailed it to yourself, which was the poor man's notary. It's a good idea to log stuff with the WGA, but yeah, I think they're a little bit looser. I mean, I don't know how it was in 1968, but yeah. I mean, if I were Sherwood Schwartz and I had Gilligan's Island under my belt, I would have sued this movie for being like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You made a movie with almost the exact same title of an unproduced pilot of mine that's been to all 3 TV networks. Maybe this got out. Like, Lucy's a big TV power player at the time, too. So, I don't know. Anyway. Too early in the show about the Brady Bunch for legal action and squabbles. Maybe one of the reasons he didn't sue is that he really had his hands full getting the show off the ground for ABC. Sherwood Schwartz oversaw pretty much every aspect of the production personally, including plots for the episodes. Many of the stories from the Brady Bunch were drawn from his own family life. And I love this, perhaps not coincidentally, his favorite episode of the series was one called Father of the Year, where Marcia enters a newspaper contest against Mike Brady's wishes in order to write an essay about how wonderful her stepdad is, and hilarity ensues. It's doubtful that Sherwood Schwartz's own daughter would have done this at the time because she was honestly kind of pissed by the whole Brady Bunch thing. Sherwood's daughter, Hope, would later say that she found the Brady Bunch really embarrassing because she'd often watch the show and see stories from her own life popping up in the plot lines. Presumably, Sherwood made it up to her by getting her not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 guest spots on the show, including a recurring role as Greg Brady's steady girlfriend, Rachel. And Hope Schwartz would later go on to marry musician Lawrence Juber, who is the guitarist in Paul McCartney's Wings in 1979. He played on their Back to the Egg album. Together, along with her brother Lloyd, more on him later, the 3 of them wrote a Brady Bunch musical that premiered in October 2020 at the Algonquin Playhouse in Maine.
I was trying to find something interesting to say about him, and on his Wikipedia page, it just says he was miscredited as Lawrence Tuber on this, which is potato. A kind of potato, a tuber, on the 1981 Ringo Starr solo record, Stop and Smell the Roses.
Oh.
Poor Lawrence. Sorry, what were we talking about? As you were.
But we can't talk about Brady Bunch music without discussing the famous theme song, which was written by Sherwood Schwartz himself. Sherwood Schwartz's productions were famous for the ingenious story songs that always outlined the plot of the show. He'd co-written the Gilligan's Island theme, which, interestingly, their pilot had a completely unrelated calypso song on it, which is kind of a catchy tune. Look it up on YouTube. But the Gilligan's Island theme song gives you all the information you need to know about the series right there. So if you're brand new, you can hop right in. It's great. Probably one of the reasons that contributed to its success. Well, Sherwood Schwartz also wrote the lyrics to the Brady Bunch theme with music by the composer Frank Duvall. And hilariously, he was always haunted by the line, they knew that it was much more than a hunch, because it was basically just a placeholder, but he couldn't think of anything better. And Sherwood Schwartz's son Lloyd would torment him by sneaking up behind him and singing that line in his ear, which is funny to me. It is a pretty bad line. The theme song for the first season of the Brady Bunch was sung by the Peppermint Trolley Company, who were an LA area sunshine pop band, who were basically just like half a step away from being studio musicians. And in fact, some of the famous Wrecking Crew session musician players were the ones that are on that song. You know, they're the people who played with Phil Spector, the Beach Boys, Elvis. So you've got Carol Kay, the bassist, and Carol Brady together at last. But during filming for the first season, Sherwood Schwartz supposedly heard Christopher Knight, who played Peter Brady, singing the Brady Bunch theme song around the set, and he thought this was really cute, and this gave him the idea, supposedly, to have all 6 Brady kids sing the song themselves. But I think the timing of this is really suspicious because the second season premiered right when The Partridge Family premiered, which, you know, obviously became a massive hit both on television and the radio airwaves. So I'm guessing Sherwood Schwartz wanted a piece of that big TV family music act action. That same year, 1970, they released an album of the Brady kids singing Christmas carols called Merry Christmas from the Brady Bunch. And hilariously, the following year, the Partridge Family released their Yuletide album, A Partridge Family Christmas Card. I just love this notion of like an arms race between Cowsill knockoff gargantuan singing families on network TV in the early 70s. I think they were both on ABC though, so maybe it was like a same team kind of thing, but still.
Oh, Hal Blaine played on the Partridge Family record.
Oh, yeah. They had a lot of Wrecking Crew people on those.
Yeah. Huh.
I think that the harpsichord, those like harpsichord triplets on the theme to the Partridge Family, or Come On Get Happy or whatever it's called, was inspired by the Beach Boys song. It was just a single only called The Little Girl I Once Knew. The yeah. I can always bring it back to Brian Wilson.
And his sandbox. Casting. When it came to assembling casting, that segue, Jesus Christ.
Really, I mean, I didn't really give you much there.
I mean, I'm just, fucking Brady Bunch. The cast of the Brady Bunch was so much more than a hunch. Anybody? Just golf swing. When it came time to assemble the crew of Brady children, much like Dr. Hammond in Jurassic Park, Sherwood Schwartz spared no expense. He auditioned, by some reports, 464 children over the course of 3 months. We do the math on that? 5 8-hour workdays a week. How many children per hour is that?
Yeah.
Kid just comes in and opens their mouth. He's like, no, next.
It's about 1 an hour, by the way.
Oh, I guess that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fine. To find the 6 young leads, 3 boys and 3 girls, he had a funny process to determine which kids had the right stuff. And when he held auditions in his office, he put toys all over his desk as a distraction. He figured that the kids who wouldn't become fixated on the toys were the ones with the stamina and focus required for making a sitcom. Is that like the Reagan's jelly beans rule?
Oh, was that true? I know he loved jelly beans and had a jar of them on his desk. Was that to like try to weed out if people had self-control? I didn't know that.
He had a standing order of 720 bags of Jelly Bellies per month.
Man after my own heart.
I was going to say, that's up there with you. As Christopher Knight, who played Peter Brady, later said, it wasn't a talent audition. It was a looks audition. Schwartz was very clever about how he structured his TV family. He wanted the 3 age groups of kids on the show, children, tweens, and teens, to appeal to a full range of young viewers so that everyone, regardless of their age or gender, could find a character on the show that they could identify with.
I think that's really clever.
It's very clever. Yeah. And this goes a long way to explaining why the show was a big hit with kids more so than adults. And to visually illustrate the idea of a blended family, he wanted the husband and wife to each have different colored hair, and their corresponding children's hair would match. This early in the casting, though, they didn't know who the parents would be yet. So instead of having just 6 kids, Sherwood pulled 12, 3 blonde girls, 3 brunette boys that wound up on the show, as well as reserves of 3 brunette girls and 3 blonde boys, or palette swapped. It's like in the Mortal Kombat games or like video game design where they like just would swap the colors of, like in the first Mortal Kombat game, the ninjas, Sub-Zero and Scorpion, there's all this lore about how they're mortal enemies or whatever. And when they were designing the game, they were just like, it's the same guy, just changes colors.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, palette swapping. It's like a thing with early video games. Yeah. As Sherwood later said in his book, Brady, Brady, the complete story of the Brady Bunch as told by the father/son team who really know. That should have gone back to the editor.
That's a little defensive. That's a defensive book title.
To this day, there are 3 dark-haired girls and 3 blonde boys somewhere in the world who might have been the Brady Bunch kids. And they are just finding that out if they're reading this book.
Actually,
grim.
That's not true. The Almost Jan, who's a woman with the awesome name of Debbie Storm, was given a bit part as Jan's classmate in the episode My Fair Opponent. Thank you.
I just wanted to see if she has any other credits. I mean, she has many credits, but it's all Brady Bunch related stuff. Oh, she was in a movie called The Brotherhood of Satan.
Well, did you know, and we'll get to this later, the actual person who played Jan Brady, Eve Plum, tried out for the part of Reagan in The Exorcist while she was on the Brady Bunch in 1973. Yeah.
Okay.
So Brady Bunch and Satan. There's a little,
Yeah, a little connection
synergy there.
It is worth noting, however, that hair dye was in fact used to give nature a helping hand with the casting. Mike Lookinland was Sherwood Schwartz's first choice for the role of youngest son Bobby, and he had naturally strawberry blonde hair. When brown-haired Robert Reed was cast as the dad, the kid had to endure his hair being dyed a wide variety of colors so that it looked appropriately dark under the harsh studio lights. Susan Olsen, who played Cindy, had it even worse. She was blonde, but not blonde enough for the producers. Well, you would have thought a Jewish television show guy would have been more sensitive to the plight of blonde people. So this 8-year-old kid had to submit to regular bleaching early on in the series. By the time they started shooting season 2, her hair had begun falling out in clumps. So she went to Sherwood Schwartz in tears, begging him to stop having this happen. And he ordered the crew to let her hair alone. Speaking of hair, viewers noticed that Mike Brady and his 2 oldest sons, Greg and Peter, went from having straight hair to their iconic big bushy Rod Flanders-esque curls between the 3rd and 4th season, prompting many to speculate that they were forced to get perms, which was then the trend for hirsute men of the 70s.
Au courant, if you will.
This is au courant, if you will. Yeah, very good. This is reportedly not true. Florence Henderson says that the style shift was a result of the episode being filmed in Hawaii in 1972, where the humidity supposedly caused Robert Reed, the Brady dad Mike's, hair to curl. And this supposedly led them to abandon the hair straightening treatment and go au natural. But back to Cindy.
Maybe just natural. Yeah.
Back to Cindy. Poor, bald Cindy. Or rather, the young actress who portrayed her, Susan Olsen. She actually had an impressive career up to this point, considering she was so young when the show premiered. She'd appeared in episodes of Ironside, Gunsmoke, and the groundbreaking sitcom Julia, and she had a role in the Elvis movie The Trouble with Girls in 1968. Is that one of the better ones?
No. I mean, none of them are. After Blue Hawaii, they all kind of took a note. Viva Las Vegas is okay, I guess. But yeah, not one of the good ones.
She was reportedly the only easy casting decision for the show because Sherwood Schwartz was so thoroughly charmed by her lisp. He recalls her saying, "I was on an episode of Gunsmoke. I was on a horse and I got frightened by a snake." And that was the end of the audition. She had the part. Rather than send her to a speech therapist, Sherwood allowed her to speak naturally on the show.
How generous of him.
Let's make this temporary speech impediment the defining characteristic of the rest of your life. And even incorporated it into an episode called A Fistful of Reasons. What?
I don't know.
It's like a fistful of dollars.
Yeah.
But there's a lisp thing in there.
Maybe.
A fistful. God, these people. Where she was teased by the buddy, Bully Hinton, who taunted her by chanting, baby talk, it's a wonder you can walk." Olsen regularly worked with a speech therapist until the age of 19 and ultimately underwent surgery to assist with this.
Is that something that we both share? Weren't we? I was treated for disfluent speech as a little kid.
I had a lisp. Yeah.
You had a lisp? I didn't know that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Look at us now. Acting.
Suddenly seeking Susan. I have no problem with my S's anymore. Thanks to the Central Pennsylvania public school system. Honestly, I'm surprised I wasn't taken out back and shot. There was an episode in season 2 where Cindy tattles on everyone in her family, and this had tragic consequences in her social life when she was shunned by the kids at her school, who assumed that she and Cindy were one and the same. I was teased mercilessly, she was quoted as saying in 2019. I know about bullying, but I had really good parents who gave me a lot of wisdom. I was being bullied because other kids were jealous. One time I was riding my bike around the neighborhood and saw a group of kids playing on a big mound of dirt. I wanted to go play with them. Same. So I got up my nerve and rode my bike over to them and tried to play with them. They started throwing dirt at me, saying, Brady, brat, go home. I thought, wait a minute, I'm on a TV show and I have so much fun. I don't blame them for being jealous. I'd rather be on that TV show than playing on a mound of dirt. So let them have their dirt. What a hilariously specific anecdote.
Sometimes life is like that.
Susan Olsen actually started an inadvertent feud with another TV star at the time. She wanted to give herself sausage curl pigtails. Are you really? You're making this stuff up.
That's what they call it. Sausage curl pigtails, as I've seen them described.
To look like another cute blonde TV star at the time, Anissa Jones, who played the character Buffy on the show Family Affair, starring Sebastian Cabot and Brian Keith, the dad from the original Parent Trap movie. That's a real trifecta of your interests.
Yeah, did you know this show?
No.
Oh.
Is it good?
I mean, this is definitely a segment that's for my fellow millennial kids who spent way too much time watching TV Land as a kid. It's a mid-60s...
All 4 of them.
Yeah. It's a mid-60s sitcom. No. It's not
It's
good.
not one of the good ones.
It's not
Okay.
one of the good ones.
Well, the character of Cindy seemed modeled after the Buffy character, right down to the creepy doll she carried around. Buffy had a doll named Mrs. Beasley, and Cindy had Kitty Carryall. Another actress on Family Affair, Kathy Garver, who played Buffy's older sister, Sissy, was not pleased with this. And she told Fox News as much a few years back, saying, if you watch the show, The Brady Bunch, you see Susan Olsen dressed up like Anissa Jones was on our show, wearing a mini dress and sporting the 2 blonde pigtails, carrying a doll around all the time, just like Anissa did. And she, Susan Olsen, has gone on TV shows and has admitted that they were trying to copy the success of our show with that character.
Anissa Jones is kind of like the original child star with a tragic after story. She died in 1976 at the age of 18 in Los Angeles, and the coroner said it was one of the biggest drug overdoses he'd ever seen. And for an LA area coroner to say that, that's in 1976, that's saying something. There are traces of cocaine, PCP, Quaaludes, and Seconal found in her bloodstream. As well as a small vial of blue liquid next to her, which was never identified. So yeah, if you the show Family Affair is sort of
Permanently asterisked.
well, not permanently asterisk, but I mean it's sort of it lives on given that history, that unfortunate history, I should say.
Susan Olsen went on to become a hydroponic weed grower at the advice of her then husband. When this was still technically illegal, she would say that this was one of the reasons that they got divorced. And she went on to host what many have described as a right-leaning radio program on LA Talk Radio until she parted company with the network. She denies that she was fired due to alleged/reported Islamophobic and homophobic remarks that you can Google that we will not be reading on this show. Where were we?
The 70s.
Your favorite Cindy-related Brady story is there's a scene in the episode Cindy Brady, Lady, where she struggled to memorize her lines. And as she left the kitchen set at the end of the scene, she can be seen breaking character and sticking her tongue out. That's because she thought that they were still rehearsing and she was growing frustrated. They left the shot in, which you call one of the many sloppy editing decisions made on the show.
Yeah.
You have it out for the Brady Bunch editing team.
I mean, I think this was because it was just pre-DVRs and home video. So
Right.
I guess, it was assumed that no one would ever notice.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. There are numerous instances of continuity errors in the Brady Bunch. Jan wearing a green hair tie in one scene, brown in another. Greg wearing beetle boots in one scene and sneakers in another. One of the biggest examples is in the season 2 episode The Winner, where Mike and Carol Brady take Bobby to a local TV station to compete in an ice cream eating competition.
He didn't have a trophy. He was the only Brady kid without a trophy. So they took him to a competition that he had a chance in hell of winning. It's cute.
They leave their house in a blue convertible and return home in a brown station wagon.
He lost so badly, they had to give him their car.
Yeah, that's egregious. And then there were times that the show would recycle Marcia's outfits for other characters later, a few episodes later. For example, the orange and white miniskirt outfit she wears in the episode where she meets Davy Jones, it shows up later on a character in the background. That's just due to the Brady family's largesse. They were just handing out their clothes to children in the neighborhood.
Wear it once and then burn it. And then Carol was like, "No, honey, I said burn it." And then she snuck it out back. And we're going to talk about the Brady family patriarch, Mike Brady, but you need to take this next section. It's with your beloved Gene Hackman.
Oh, come on. How did you not talk about Susan Olsen's art?
Oh, with the donut?
Yeah.
Take us there, my dude.
Susan Olsen, in July of 2012, was one of a number of artists and celebrities invited to show their work at the PAS Gallery in Fullerton, California, called Art with an Agenda, an exhibit inspired by Kelly Thomas. Kelly Thomas was a homeless man with schizophrenia who died 5 days after being severely beaten by members of the Fullerton Police Department at 37. Olsen's piece was titled Still Life and showed a half-eaten donut in a puddle of blood besides a lit flashlight. All right, on to the parents. For the Brady family patriarch, the production ultimately got actor Robert Reed, who we will get to. But originally, Sherwood Schwartz had his sights set on Gene Hackman, baby. Popeye f***ing Doyle. Oh, man, only if he did it in character as Popeye. Just dropping racial slurs and drunk. Running over shopping carts under the elevated track in Brooklyn. Oh, man. The studio overseeing the production, Paramount, killed the idea, sadly, even though Hackman had just had his big breakout role in the Oscar-winning Bonnie and Clyde as Buck Barrow. He still wasn't a big enough name for the studio to consider him as a lead in their new sitcom. Sherwood later said, Paramount wouldn't even okay Gene Hackman for an interview because he had a very low TVQ. TVQ is a survey that executives use to determine the audience's familiarity with performances, like a Q store. They weren't commenting on Gene Hackman's intelligence, which is very high.
No, yeah.
Both emotional and intellectual, I'm told. But the year after the Brady Bunch debuted, Gene Hackman, with no TVQ, starred in a little picture called The French Connection and won the Academy Award for Best Actor and has been a major star ever since. So take that, Paramount.
Well, folks, Gene Hackman hates many things, as we've talked about on this show, but he probably wouldn't have hated the role of Mike Brady as much as the man who did ultimately play him. The network wanted to go with Robert Reed because he had a lead role in a popular early 60s legal drama, The Defenders, which earned a whopping 13 Emmys during its run, which is 13 more than the Brady Bunch ever won. So not only did he have audience recognition from that show, but he also was under contract to Paramount at the time to do a TV pilot version of the Neil Simon Broadway show Barefoot in the Park, which had recently been made into a movie with Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. I cannot stress this enough. Robert Reed, the Brady Bunch dad, was a capital S serious actor. He trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. He was a member of the Actors Studio in New York City for 30 years, and he was a member of a Shakespeare company. So he can almost be forgiven for feeling that the role of Mike Brady was somewhat beneath him. I am really hard-pressed to name an actor who, from the very start, so fiercely hated the role that made him famous. He initially said that when the show was pitched to him, it was a semi-serious adult drama about modern blending families. And then somewhere along the line, this shifted. In an interview in 1988, Robert Reed's quoted as saying, "I wouldn't have given the shows a nickel's chance of succeeding." He would often go into Sherwood Schwartz's office and say, "Sherwood, I got to get out of this. I can't believe you talked me into this." In a 1983 interview, Robert Reed admitted that he often butted head with Schwartz, saying, "We fought over the scripts, always over the scripts. The producer, Sherwood Schwartz, had done Gilligan's Island, which was just gag lines. That would have been what the Brady Bunch was, had I not protested." And Sherwood Schwartz was so frustrated with Robert Reed that he repeatedly has claimed over the years that had the show been renewed for a 6th season, it was canceled before that, he would have either killed off Mike Brady or replaced the actor playing him, a la Darren Stevens in Bewitched. That's what they did to the Darren Stevens character. Sherwood Schwartz later said of Reed, television in general was beneath him, and situation comedy was beneath television in his opinion. He wound up on a show that he didn't want to do in the first place, and it became more and more difficult for him. And Sherwood Schwartz tried to placate Robert Reed by letting him direct a few episodes, which is an old producer's trick to keep stars happy, like they would do on MASH, for example, with Alan Alda. But unfortunately, Robert Reed could not be placated so easily. He frequently sent Sherwood Schwartz handwritten memos questioning his character's motivation or the emotional authenticity of a scene. And he was also a stickler for facts. He once held up production by arguing about the implausibility of his character slipping on an egg, and he only agreed to shoot the scene after he dropped the egg for real and accidentally slipped. Which he said later, the whole way down as I was falling, I thought, geez, I probably deserve this.
He's a sliver of self-awareness.
Yeah, oh yeah. He once complained about the quality of fake ink that stained Alice the housekeeper's uniform, prompting him to dash off a furious multi-page letter to the show's top brass, tearing apart the prop department and calling the ink scene, quote, so unfunny that even a laugh machine would balk at it. But the most famous instance of Robert Reed, a.k.a. Mike Brady's nitpicking, occurred on the season 4 episode, Jan, the Only Child. And in this episode, Carol Brady and Alice the housekeeper were having a contest to see who could make the best strawberry dessert. The character of Mike was supposed to walk in and say, "It smells like strawberry heaven." Robert Reed refused to say this line because strawberries don't smell when they're being cooked. And he supposedly dragged out an encyclopedia to verify this angrily to Sherwood Schwartz. And he wouldn't act the scene until the line was changed to, "I do believe I've died and gone to strawberry heaven," which is still pretty terrible. Sherwood Schwartz got so used to predicting this nitpicking that he started brushing up on legal technicalities to ward off any potential problems. For one episode, when Mike Brady installs a payphone in the house for his kids to use, Robert Reed sure enough complained about this being totally implausible. And Sherwood Schwartz told him that it was in fact legal to install a payphone in a private residence in Santa Monica, which is where Sherwood Schwartz told him the Bradys lived. And since he had never up to this point specified where the Bradys lived, Robert Reed had no choice but to storm off the set and drown his sorrows at a bar near the Paramount lot, which he did a lot. Apparently, shooting in the afternoons with Robert Reed was a little tricky. The final straw for Robert Reed came while filming the final episode of season 5 in 1974, when Greg Brady buys a hair tonic from his younger brother Bobby, and it turns his hair orange. Robert Reed supposedly objected because, among many other things, the product wasn't FDA approved.
Jesus Christ.
He wrote a lengthy, extremely eloquent memo to Sherwood Schwartz and his staff, which is inexplicably available to read on the Steve Hoffman forums, which is usually a forum for music stuff, but it's on there. And in this memo, he evokes Hamlet and Citizen Kane. And it's actually a really fascinating document, which I encourage everybody who's interested to go check out, in which Robert Reed outlines what he calls the, quote, fundamental difference between melodrama, drama, comedy, farce, slapstick, satire, and fantasy. He draws on all of his actor training in this memo. It's pretty impressive, I have to say. I'd like to read some of it because I find it both interesting and also it's just so incongruous coming from the guy who played Mike Brady. He writes, "These styles of comedy require not only a difference in terms of construction, but also in presentation and most explicitly, styles of acting. The dramatis personae are non-interchangeable. For example, Hamlet, archetypical of the dramatic character, could not be written into Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream and still retain his identity. Ophelia could not play a scene with Titania. Richard II could not be found in Twelfth Night. In other words, a character indigenous to one style of the theater cannot function in any other styles. The boundaries are rigid, and within the confines of one theatric piece, the style must remain constant. Why? It is a long since proven theorem in the theater that an audience will adjust its suspension of belief to the degree that the opening of the presentation leads them. When a curtain rises on two French maids in a farce set discussing the peccadillos of their master, the audience is now set for an evening of theater in a certain style and are prepared to accept having excluded certain levels of reality. And that is the price difference in the styles of theater, both for the actor and the writer, the degree of reality inherent. Pure drama and comedy are closest to core realism. Slapstick and fantasy are farthest removed. It is also part of that theorem that one cannot change styles midstream. Television falls under exactly the same principle. What the networks in their oversimplification call sitcoms are actually quite diverse styles, except when bastardized by careless writing or performing. For instance, MASH is comedy. The Paul Lynde Show is farce. The Beverly Hillbillies is slapstick. Batman is satire, and A Dream of Jeannie is fantasy. Imagine Archie Bunker suddenly landing on Gilligan's Island. The maxim implicit in all this is, when the first act curtain rises on a comedy, the second act curtain has to rise on the same thing, with the actors playing commiserate styles. If it isn't already clear, not only does the audience accept a certain level of belief, but so must the actor in order to function at all. His consciousness opens like an iris to allow the proper amount of reality into his acting subtext. And all of the actors in the same piece must deal with the same level, or the audience will not know to whom to adjust and will often empathize with the character with the most credibility. Total reality eliciting the most complete empathetic response. Example, we are in the operating room in MASH, when the usual pan shot across a myriad of operating tables filled with surgical teams at work. The leads are sweating away at their work and at the same time engaged in banter with the head nurse. Suddenly the doors fly open and Batman appears. I'm stopping.
Sounds awesome.
I'm going to stop quoting now for a moment. This goes on for a while before he gets back to the Brady Bunch. He says, the most generic problem to date in the Brady Bunch has been this almost constant scripted transposition of styles. He writes a little more before criticizing certain specific previous episodes, including a silent movie-style pie-throwing sequence that offended him to his core in a previous episode. Without belaboring the inequities of the script, which are varied and numerous, the major point to all this is, once an actor has geared himself up to play a given style with its prescribed level of belief, he cannot react to or accept within the same confines of the piece a different style. In other words, when the kid's hair turns red, it's Batman in the operating room. I can't play it. Thus, the memo ends. I cut out a tremendous amount.
What a bitch.
So I'm going to call this the dude rule from The Big Lebowski. As in, you're not wrong, Robert Reed. You're just an asshole. That's my third rule that I made up off the top of my head for this episode. Sherwood Schwartz apparently didn't get this lengthy memo in time to make any of these changes to the script, so he simply cut Robert Reed from the scene and ultimately the entire episode. Robert Reed showed up on the set anyway, and things got weird and tense. Security reportedly offered to have him removed, like physically carried off the set, but Sherwood declined because he didn't want to do that to him in front of the kids. And as a result, Mike Brady was officially, quote, out of town for Greg's high school graduation, which was taking place in that same episode. And most importantly, to the history of the series, it meant that Mike Brady did not appear in the final episode of The Brady Bunch, which was canceled before work on the 6th season could begin. So that's all weird. But to his credit, despite their differences, Sherwood Schwartz praised Robert Reed's professionalism and commitment to his performance. He later said, whatever he chose to do after arguing and fussing and so forth, he would do it well. And he also acknowledged the chemistry among the actors. They became very attached to each other. Even Bob Reed, who was a personal pain to me, loved the kids and they loved him. And yeah, to the kids on the set, Robert Reed became like a second father. And in fact, the main reason Robert Reed didn't quit the Brady Bunch to begin with was that he didn't want to abandon them. And he really treated them as if they were his own kids. He once took the kids on a trip to England because he wanted to expose them to culture and Shakespeare, which I find adorable. And he also gave them Super 8 cameras for Christmas to try to teach them about the process of filmmaking. And on one occasion, his by-the-book pain-in-the-ass nitpicking actually saved the kids' lives. The season 5 episode, The Cincinnati Kids, was filmed at a theme park in Cincinnati, and Robert Reed refused to allow the cast to shoot a scene on a roller coaster until the camera equipment that was secured to the front of one of the roller coaster cars had been tested for safety. And during the test, the camera came dislodged and rammed into the seats where they would have been sitting. Susan Olsen, who played Cindy, was so freaked out that she refused to ride the coaster at all, and a double was used for the scene. And Susan Olsen posted a message to Facebook a few years back praising Robert Reed, who died in 1992, as a beloved father figure, explaining that the man who, quote, bottle-fed puppies when he wasn't quarreling with the heads of networks shaped her heart as much as my biological parents did. And in the same note, Susan Olsen speculated that Robert Reed's struggle to accept his own homosexuality was a key factor in his unhappiness, and I don't think he ever came out in his lifetime. Like so many actors who began their career in the 50s and 60s, he believed that being openly gay would ruin his career. And Olsen wrote that those surrounding Reed for much of his life, quote, shoved their own judgment down his throats, and sadly, he bought into it. He thought he was wrong. Because homosexuality was so taboo, he could never make peace with himself. He never allowed himself to have a genuine love. He was forever tormented by his own disdain for the natural inclinations that he was born with. Bob was a family man. Had he been allowed to form a relationship with another man, he would have been the best husband ever. And Florence Henderson, who played Carol Brady, echoed the sentiment in a 2000 interview with ABC News. Here he was, the perfect father of this wonderful little family, a perfect husband, she said, but he was an unhappy person. I think had Bob not been forced to live this double life, I think it would have dissipated a lot of that anger and frustration he had. I had a lot of compassion for him because I knew he was suffering. Many associated with the Brady Bunch production, including Florence Henderson and Barry Williams, who played Greg Brady, sadly agreed that back in 1969, having an openly gay man playing a straight sitcom father would have most certainly doomed the series. It probably would have caused the demise of the show, Barry Williams acknowledged, and I think it would have hurt his career tremendously. Robert Reed's sexuality was an open secret around the set at the time, and Florence Henderson said that when they were shooting their very first romantic scenes together for the pilot, she could tell he was getting extremely uncomfortable, and she could even see his heart beating through his PJ shirt when they were shooting scenes where they kissed. And Sherwood Schwartz, this all went over his head. He was just demanding take after take. And finally, Florence told him to back off and took Robert Reed aside, and they talked things out. And she said they spent a lot of time rehearsing these love scenes in private together so they could be more comfortable with each other and ultimately would look more natural when it came time to film them, which was done usually at the end of the day after the kids went home. But yeah, Robert Reed never discussed his homosexuality with the actors who played his kids, and they all said later that he probably would have been mortified to know that they knew. It was a secret that went unspoken between the cast until, according to Susan Olsen, Maureen McCormick's wedding in 1985. She played Marcia. Susan said, we were all sitting around talking and Bob hadn't shown up. And Maureen said, I wish he felt comfortable enough to bring a female or male date just to be here. And that's when one by one we were all like, you knew he was gay too? I found out when I was 9 from my mummy, but none of us ever talked about it because we didn't think it was a big deal. Robert Reed won critical acclaim and an Emmy nomination for his groundbreaking role as Pat Cattison, a transgender doctor in a 1975 episode of Medical Center. And he also reprised his role as Mike Brady in every Brady-related spinoff, which I think is kind of touching, just shows how close he felt to the rest of the cast, including the short-lived 1990 dramedy series, The Bradys, which we'll talk more about later. These episodes featured serious dramatic plot lines. For example, in the pilot episode, when Bobby Brady, who dropped out of grad school to pursue a career as a race car driver, has a horrific car accident that leaves him paralyzed. Yeah, these we'll talk more about this later, but these episodes get really serious. Mike Brady gets involved in politics, and Peter Brady begins dating the abusive daughter of his political rival, and Marcia struggles with alcoholism as her deadbeat husband loses a series of jobs, resulting in the couple moving into the Brady family home to save money. Yeah, it gets dark. So, I don't know, maybe Robert Reed felt vindicated that he finally got his, serious blended family plot lines a couple decades later. But unfortunately, this triumph was all too brief because the show was canceled after 6 episodes because people didn't want to see the Bradys living sad lives. That's why we watched the Bradys. We wanted to escape our own sad lives. And even sadder, Robert Reed died 2 years after the Bradys went off the air on May 12th, 1992, of colon cancer at the age of 59, way too young. And he was HIV positive at the time of his death, which led some outlets to inaccurately report that he died of AIDS, which wasn't true. And weeks before his death, Robert Reed called Florence Henderson and asked her to inform the rest of his Brady Bunch family that he was terminally ill. And he remains a beloved figure to his TV family and his fans. He was rated the 14th greatest TV dad of all time in a 2004 list published by TV Guide, which I think is lovely. Although I kind of think he should have been higher. So yeah, Mike Brady has something of a tragic shadow hanging over him.
That's a complicated, that is a complicated legacy.
I know. I mean, great actor.
Good
Bad
Lord.
role, great actor.
You know his last televised role was in Jake and the Fat Man?
Have I told you
About
Wait.
Jake and the Fat Man?
No, okay. I was going to text you this story the other day, and I didn't because it was the weekend. I didn't want to bother you with more of my brain droppings. So Jake and the Fat Man is a running joke in my family. Mm-hmm. My grandfather used to fall asleep in front of the TV, and his wife used to always yell at him for falling asleep in front of the TV. So to try to circumvent this, he would just randomly yell out plot points whenever she was in the other room doing dishes or something, and he would just to try to prove that he hadn't fallen asleep.
Okay.
So my parents drove to surprise my grandma and grandpa 8 hours to a blizzard or something on Christmas. And they arrive there and they open the door and let themselves in the house, and they find my grandfather asleep in front of the TV. And he wakes with a start and he sees them, and his first thought isn't, oh my God, my son and his wife just drove from Massachusetts to Pennsylvania to see us on a holiday, but was, oh my God, they're going to bust me for falling asleep in front of the TV. So he just points at the TV and he's watching Jake and the Fat Man, and he goes, they kidnapped the Fat Man. Because I guess the character of the Fat Man had been kidnapped. But out of context, just...
They kidnapped the Fat Man.
Yeah, my dad just hearing that, having driven through a blizzard for 8 hours, and that being the greeting from his father, just complete non sequitur, is funny to him 35 years later, and it's become a catchphrase in my family. They kidnapped the Fat Man. And I was going to text you that this weekend because it came up, and I thought you'd find it funny. I can't believe you asked me that. Wow.
As you meditate on that, we'll be right back with more Too Much Information after these messages. Well, pivoting from that to Mrs. Brady,
Who's all lightness.
Florence Henderson wasn't even the original first choice to play the Brady matriarch. Competition for the role was apparently very fierce. One actress seeking the role sent Sherwood Schwartz nude photos. Do we know who that was?
I do not. I looked.
Another woman grabbed Sherwood Schwartz's crotch when he went to shake her hand. Neither of them got the part. When pre-production first began, Sherwood Schwartz wanted to keep the mom character similar to Lucille Ball in the movie Yours, Mine, and Ours, which we mentioned earlier. To that end, they wanted Mrs. Brady to be a wacky comedienne a la Lucy. They originally cast a comedic actress named Joyce Bulifant, who was used in most of the screen tests for the child actors during auditions. And in fact, one of the reasons that Eve Plum landed the role of Jam was because she looked a lot like Joyce Bulifant. But dynamics changed when they cast Ann B. Davis for the role of the housekeeper Alice. Davis was an Emmy-winning comedian, so to balance things out, they decided to recast the mother as someone more down-to-earth. This was bad news for Bulifant, who later told Fox News that she was signed, sealed, and delivered to play the role of Carol Brady. As she was trying on costumes 3 days before the pilot was to begin shooting, Sherwood Schwartz broke the news about the recast, and Bulifant was understandably devastated. I had signed a 7-year contract, she recalled. The little girls were cast to look like me. She got over it. She went on to play a leading role in the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
With Cousin Oliver, I believe, who we'll talk about later.
Before casting Florence Henderson, producers tried to get her best friend Shirley Jones. But Shirley Jones passed on the role, as she put it, because she refused to play a part where all she had to do was, quote, take a pot roast out of the oven. Of course, just a year after the Brady Bunch premiered, Shirley Jones would then play Carol Brady's early 70s TV matriarch of an extra-large size family rival on The Partridge Family. That was a hell of a dangling modifier.
Thank you.
And this show aired an hour after the Brady Bunch on Friday nights on ABC. They really did just a big old family rock block on ABC, huh?
They love the Cowsills. Yeah, they're all Partridge Family based on the Cowsills.
Florence Henderson had an impressive background in television. She'd been the first woman to guest host The Tonight Show in 1962 between Jack Parr and Johnny Carson's tenure. That's really cool. Good for her. Was she a stand-up?
She wasn't. She was like an all-around entertainer. I think she had a Broadway background and sang.
When Henderson arrived late to do her screen test for the Brady Bunch, she couldn't find anyone to do her makeup. And she ultimately stumbled on a makeup room for Star Trek, which briefly shared studio space with the Brady Bunch. Henderson said she sat in a makeup chair between William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, both of whom ignored her.
I think she hated them for the rest of her life for that reason, feeling slighted by them.
That's fair.
Yeah.
The Brady Bunch pilot was shot in September 1968. Why is the Brady Bunch pilot never included in stock news montage of the turbulent year of 1968?
Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King.
Brady Bunch premiere.
DNC riots in Chicago. The Brady Bunch. Oh, well, it didn't premiere. It was
right.
Shot
It was
then.
the pilot was shot.
One of the many things that was shot in 1968.
Woo! The Brady Bunch pilot was shot in September of 1968, a full year before the show premiered on primetime. And during that time, Florence Henderson was cast in a movie musical called The Song of Norway, which was filming on location in Denmark when she learned that the show was going into production. As a result, the Brady Bunch began filming the first 6 episodes of the show without her, while The Song of Norway wrapped in Europe. Weirdly, this movie also featured David Bowie's early girlfriend, Hermione Farthingale, as a dancer. That's a fake name. You made that up.
Real name. He wrote a song about it, Leonard Hermione.
She broke up with Bowie to take the role, and it left him heartbroken for the rest of his life. As you mentioned, the song Letter to Hermione appeared on the Space Oddity album. And in the video for Where Are We Now in 2013, he can be seen wearing a t-shirt that says The Song of Norway. Okay, man.
Well, here we go. Wait a minute. You know David Bowie's real name is David Jones.
Yes.
And he changed it. One of the reasons is because he didn't want to be confused with David Jones of the Monkees,
yes.
who played a crucial role on the Brady Bunch, which we don't really get into much in this episode because we're too busy talking about
Go on.
Coke mostly.
Political assassinations, adrenochrome, police brutality. What else have we touched on? But back to Florence Henderson. She was forced to wear a wig for the first season because her hair had been cropped short for a Broadway production of South Pacific, which sadly featured none of David Bowie's exes. As revealed in the pilot, Carol Brady's maiden name was Tyler, and her married name was Martin. So there's been a great deal of speculation among fans as to what happened to Carol's husband. Mike Brady was a widower, but the show was always vague about what had ended Carol's previous marriage. Sherwood Schwartz has said in several interviews that his intention was for Carol to have been a divorcee. But divorce was still considered to be taboo for primetime television, especially for such a family-friendly show. Towards the end of her life, Florence Henderson preferred to tell interviews that she'd murdered her first husband. She told the Huffington Post, "I was the original Black Widow." Mystery solved. Good for her. She's funny.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's on 30 Rock.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. By all accounts, Florence Henderson was a strong, powerful, inspiring lady who overcame poverty and neglect during the Great Depression when she was the youngest of 10 children. She later said that she modeled her character of Carol Brady as the mother that she'd always wanted. She was active until the end, attending a taping of Dancing with the Stars to cheer on her TV daughter, Maureen McCormick, just 3 days before her death in Thanksgiving 2016. We stan a loyal sitcom mom. And she was a hoot. She was a funny lady. I'm trying to remember some of the 30 Rock bits with her. Anyway, she has a cameo in the Weird Al music video for Amish Paradise and the opening of the MTV Movie Awards when she does the Sharon Stone leg cross from Basic Instinct. I distinctly remember that.
Okay. You're staring very closely at a screen right now, which makes me wonder what you're looking at.
Oh,
if that was related to
no, the episode of 30 Rock.
okay.
Yeah. There's an episode where Tracy is trying to I don't know. They're doing a whole thing where Kenneth is confusing real life and sitcoms, and basically Tracy has bought Florence Henderson to come in and surprise Kenneth, and her line as she walks in, Kenneth goes, "Mrs. Brady," and she goes, "I told the black guy here, none of that Brady stuff." And then she goes, "Let's get this over with. Whose booking is this? Are you the perverts who want to go to town on each other while I make a pie?" Good for her. In 2002, she made a memorable guest appearance on the improvisational comedy show Whose Line Is It Anyway, participating in on-screen kisses with Ryan Stiles and Colin Mockery. In 2003, she made a self-deprecating turn at a Pepsi Twist. Oh, Pepsi Twist. Wasn't that the lemon Pepsi?
Yeah, friend of the pod, Pepsi Twist.
Oh, that should have been the rule. Pepsi Twist, the Pepsi Twist rule.
Oh, I would have Pepsi Twist long before I have Sprite.
Ooh, that's a hot take. With Ozzy Osbourne. But there's one Florence Henderson story that you cherry-picked among decades of them. Less about the story and more about the fact that she chose to share it at the age of 78 when she published her memoir. She had a one-night stand with then New York Mayor John Lindsay, and he gave her crabs. The then married actress revealed, what's the name of her memoir?
It's a non-Brady title.
Life is Not a Stage.
Yeah.
As the actress revealed in her memoir, Life is Not a Stage, Henderson said that Mayor Lindsay seduced her over drinks at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Then she woke up the next morning to find, quote, little black things crawling over her body. As she wrote in the memoir, guess I learned the hard way that crabs do not discriminate, but cross over all socioeconomic strata. Mayor Lindsay must have had quite the active life. What a way to put the kibosh on a relationship. He apparently sent her flowers and an apology note to make up for it. But she got one hell of a story from it.
Yes. Well, from pubic lice, we return to the Brady Bunch. The show premiered on September 26, 1969 at 8 p.m. And one of the big knocks against it then and now was that, despite the whole blended family premise, the whole setup of the show seemed kind of dated and 50s-ish. And Florence Henderson tried to get around this by lobbying the producers of the show to give Carol a job, but they insisted that she remain at home to reflect the experience of the average American woman at the time in the late 60s and early 70s. They ultimately compromised and gave her a bunch of volunteering permissions. You can work, but you can't get paid. More than just this format, the actual look and style of the show made it basically an instant cultural relic. And hilariously, this was something that the producers of the show actively considered and tried to prevent. The kids in the show hated their wardrobe and begged the costume designers for anything more fashionable to wear. But Sherwood Schwartz refused because he wanted the show to run in syndication, and he didn't want to do anything too trendy to make the show appear dated. Nice work. They also kept writing in the word groovy into the scripts, which left many of the kids, specifically Eve Plum, who played Jan, absolutely mortified. I just think it's so funny that they actually went out of their way to consider making it not look dated and somehow made it kind of one of the most dated TV shows I can consider. Well, diehard Brady heads, and I'm sure there are some out there, will remember that the Bradys had a pet dog in the first season who was known as Tiger. The animal disappeared abruptly from the show without explanation and became something of a mystery/running joke among fans. And the reason for Tiger's disappearance will have PETA up in arms. One evening, after filming the season 1 episode Kachoo, in which Jan appears to be allergic to the family dog, Tiger's trainer took the dog out for his daily exercise walk on the Paramount lot, and unfortunately during this walk, Tiger was struck by a careless driver and killed. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it was the cigar-chomping executive who did it. The trainer flew into a panic and reportedly spent the rest of the night frantically driving to every animal shelter in town trying to find an identical dog because they still had more scenes to shoot for the episode. And amazingly, the trainer almost pulled this off. They did manage to find a dog that resembled the original Tiger, but the cast and crew got suspicious when they went back to filming these scenes, only to discover that the dog couldn't follow basic direction and was absolutely terrified by the noise and lights. Aww. The only way the director got fake Tiger to stay in place during the emotional climactic scene where the boys were bidding him a tearful farewell was to nail his collar to the floor. And then the dog was written out of the show soon after, but the doghouse remained in the backyard in mute tribute. I should say the backyard set. The only reason it was left there was that a hot stage light burnt a hole in the AstroTurf of the backyard set, so they put the doghouse over it to disguise it. We'll talk more about the house later, but the Brady Bunch house was pretty junky for a guy who was supposedly an architect. That was Mike Brady's job, right? Oh, you don't know. I'm pretty sure he's an architect. During one scene when the boys are playing football in the backyard, you can actually see the AstroTurf that's supposed to be the lawn coming loose. And there were also missing tiles on the brick entryway.
You don't want to talk about the dead cat?
Oh, yeah, there was also the Brady girl's cat, Fluffy, which was featured in the pilot and never seen again. If you or a loved one know the whereabouts of the Brady Bunch's cat, Fluffy, please tweet at us at...
Someone does.
Yeah. Well, the Brady Bunch is one of those shows where you watch it and it really seems like everyone involved, from the creation on down to the actors, was stoned out of their minds. And in one scene in particular, you would be right. This scene involved Greg Brady, a.k.a. Barry Williams, who was supposed to have a day off while filming the season 4 episode appropriately titled Law and Disorder in 1973. And Barry decided to spend his day off by smoking pot with his friends because it was 1973 in Los Angeles. Then he got an emergency call from the Brady Bunch producers calling him into the studio immediately to reshoot a scene. And Barry showed up, but it was pretty soon obvious to all concerned that he was in no condition to work. He was supposed to just comment on a new boat that his dad had just bought, but his delivery was stilted, his eyes were glazed, and for some reason he inexplicably tripped over nothing in the backyard set. And ultimately the writers had to hastily rewrite the scene so that Barry had fewer lines that could just go home. He later wrote about the incident on his blog, saying, "I went through a stage of experimentation as a kid. I certainly never went to the set high again, but I don't like weed. It makes me dumb, paranoid, and hungry." But perhaps the most infamous incident concerning Greg Brady, and I would argue the most infamous incident concerning the series as a whole, was the time that Barry Williams asked his TV mom, Florence Henderson, out on a date. In his memoir, Growing Up Brady, I Was a Teenage Greg, he admitted to having a crush on Florence, referring to her as, quote, "a totally white-hot babe."
It's all in the emphasis and how you say that.
Yeah, I know. He was 16, she was 36. When those little things called hormones start kicking in, you get excited by even inanimate objects, he wrote, somewhat ungallantly, I have to say, in the chapter of his memoir memorably titled Dating Your Mom. "It wasn't that I sought to bed her," he continued. "I just wanted to spend time with her." Aww.
That's the worst thing. That's the worst thing. Why did he phrase it like that? It wasn't that I sought to bed her,
but I just wanted to spend time with her.
It's the sought to bed. Who says that?
A former 70s child star. I mean...
Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Florence Henderson was married with 4 children of her own at the time, but she went out to dinner with Barry to the Coconut Grove nightclub at the Ambassador Hotel, where RFK was shot. Bringing it all back. They just saw what Florence described in her own memoir as a popular singer. "I didn't give it all that much thought, though, since I would have gladly done the same for any of the other children if they had asked." She continued in her memoir. "They were driven by Barry's older brother because Barry himself was too young to drive. And when it was all over, Florence gave him a peck on the cheek, and that was it." And Florence Henderson later said the story was slightly exaggerated in Barry's memoir. She addressed the incident more directly on her website, writing, "That whole thing with Barry got blown way out of proportion. I guess in a sense it was a date. It was a date because Barry thought it was. But of course, I had no idea that his intentions were to, quote, date me. It has made for a good story, though." She added in her memoir, "What is very true is that Barry did have a serious crush on me, which I understood and helped him get past." Told him about the crabs thing. Let us just say that if he had entertained a roll in the hay with me, I would have never done that. Undeniably, we had a very special connection. And it goes without saying that I always felt like a surrogate mother to him and the rest of the kids. On a deeper level, I represented something to him that he admired. He loved music and knew I could sing. He also liked my work ethic and adopted it, as he still does. He remained a dear friend. The proximity of surrogate mother and roll in the hay in that anecdote is a little too close to comfort for me.
You know, Barry Williams had a 6-year live music review where he sings the songs of the 70s in, can you guess where?
Tahoe?
So close.
Reno.
Branson, Missouri.
Oh, I knew he lived in Branson, yeah. There's a giant Titanic museum in Branson. Is Branson like an epicenter of all my interests? Mid-century kitsch and Titanic?
Apparently.
Yeah, wow. Just to wrap up the whole Barry Williams sleeping with his
Wanted
TV
to
mom
his
thing.
mom, yeah.
In 2014, during an appearance on The Talk, celebrating Florence Henderson's 80th birthday, Barry Williams surprised his TV mom with a passionate kiss before telling the crowd, "That's something I've been waiting 40 years to do." But still,
It's just weird that he made that like the defining anecdote for his life.
yeah, yes, it is. Yeah, that's the quiet part, loud, Heigl. Thank you, Heigl. That is the joke.
Oh, okay, cool.
Thanks, Ted. That was the joke.
Thank you, Ted. That was the joke.
Yeah,
Oh, he's got a podcast where he goes episode
with Chris Knight.
Yeah, episode by episode.
If it's doing better than our show, I'll f***ing kill myself. Well, what's it called? The Brady Brothers or something?
Yeah,
The real Brady Bros. Oh, f***ing hell it is.
of course it is. The only thing that's important is that we're having fun.
We're still
dear friends.
We are, yes. So, Barry Williams did not have a sexual encounter with his TV mom in the 70s.
Segue. Nailed it.
But he did have a sexual encounter with his TV sister, which is almost as good / bad. He also talked about this in his memoir. There had been some sexual tension mounting, I probably shouldn't have said mounting there, between Barry Williams and Maureen, a.k.a. Marsha McCormick, on the set, and it was fairly obvious to the crew. While filming a scene where the two sat on a bed for an episode called A Room at the Top, where they battled over who got the private room in the attic, the director kept having to reshoot because the body language between the two of them was just too flirty. And Sherwood Schwartz's son Lloyd, who worked on the show, resorted to asking each actor to make a fist and place it between them as they sat on the bed, telling them to maintain that amount of distance at all times during the scene, which is basically the sitcom production equivalent of the teacher at the middle school dance, going around telling all the slow dancing tweens to leave room for Jesus. They were apparently fairly serious, at least on an emotional level. Maureen, I can't bring myself to say this, wanted to lose her virginity to Barry, which is sweet. She said in her memoir. There was apparently an instance when Barry had Maureen over to his parents' house for dinner, and then after dinner he took her up to their bedroom where they listened to some Barry White, which sounds like a polite euphemism, but that's real. But they were unfortunately interrupted by his mother calling them down for dessert, which also sounds like a euphemism, but it is not. This has somehow become the filthiest episode we've ever done.
Have they ever dressed as the twincests from Game of Thrones? That would be a funny bit.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah.
Barry Williams and Maureen McCormick as Cersei and
Laertes?
What?
Laertes?
Laertes? You think there's a character on Game of Thrones named Laertes?
Do you think I've seen Game of Thrones? Given how much I know about the Brady Bunch, do you actually think there's overlap in my brain for that?
Where did you get Laertes from?
Laertes.
Is that Greek?
Maybe. I don't know. It's probably a name I've only seen written, and I'm like, I just assume that was how you pronounced it.
Jamie Lannister.
No.
Is the other half of the
I'm from New England. I can say
twincests.
Lannister.
Yeah, Lannister.
Anyway, Maureen McCormick and Barry Williams, a.k.a. Marsha and Greg Brady, finally kissed while filming a 3-part episode in Hawaii for the show's 4th season in 1972. The pair reportedly snuck out after curfew and took a moonlight stroll on the beach where they kissed. And Barry described it in his memoir as, quote, something I've been meaning to do for a long time, which I think is the same line he used on Florence Henderson. Unfortunately, it was not quite as pleasant a memory for Maureen McCormick, who ultimately was still weirded out by the whole TV brother thing. She wrote about the incident in her own memoir, Here's the Story, Surviving Marsha Brady and Finding My True Voice. Describing the incident, it's always bad when you describe a romantic encounter with the word incident. Describing the incident like a pulpy romantic novel. We couldn't hold back any longer, she wrote. That's not how you read a romantic pulpy novel, but I'm just going to go with it. It was our first kiss, and it was long, passionate, and deep. Then it finally hit me. Oh my God, I'm kissing my brother. What am I doing? things understandably cooled after that, from her end at least. And Sherwood Schwartz was understandably worried about his two teenage leads having a relationship because this would almost certainly end in disaster. So he had his son, Lloyd, take Barry Williams aside and diffuse the whole thing, which he basically did by saying, why limit yourself? Use Maureen to get to her hot friends. The 70s.
How does her story get worse before it gets better?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, you didn't put her Coke stuff in here, did you?
No,
or did I?
Oh, no.
Okay.
You got to
oh, yeah,
that,
I'm reading it. Sorry.
You read the, well, take us there. Barry Williams fell off a surfboard and got hurt in Hawaii. Yeah, it was bad. Anyway, yeah, okay, take us there. So the story wasn't that. It's gonna be 9. It's gonna be longer than the Titanic trilogy. Let's get to the Marsha Brady cocaine stuff.
Okay. Maureen McCormick would go on to have several other high-profile 70s pop culture relationships, including with Michael Jackson, while he was still a member of the Jackson 5. She wrote in her memoir, once we went ice skating, and he held my hand as we glided around the rink. I wondered if he might try to kiss me, but he didn't. After another outing, he did give me a kiss goodbye, but it was only a gentle peck on the cheek. Less cute was a date with Steve Martin a few years later after the Brady Bunch had ended. Apparently, Martin had asked for her number through their mutual friend Chevy Chase. No idea how Maureen and Chevy knew each other, but guesses 1, 2, and 3 are cocaine. The date with Steve was in the midst of her growing substance abuse problems, and according to her account in her memoir, it did not go well. She wrote, I remember him being a very good kisser, but I was insecure and either high or spaced out, most likely both, and I didn't laugh at his jokes. Though Steve was too polite and confident of his talent to say anything, I'm sure... That's a weird thing to say.
I was like, maybe he wasn't funny.
Yeah, I'm sure my inability to carry on a normal conversation or respond intelligently put him off. We never spoke again after that date. I've always regretted my behavior because he impressed me as an extraordinary guy. I would have enjoyed a second date.
I would like to say, during her time on the Brady Bunch, Maureen McCormick also had a crush on her TV dad, Robert Reed, which wouldn't have worked for so many reasons. I would love a poll of child actors who had crushes on their TV or movie parents, and then I would like a psychologist to interpret the results of that poll, because I feel like it's like disproportionately high or proportionately high. I don't know how I feel about high, but I know it's high.
Who just confessed about having a crush on Helena Bonham Carter, one of the Harry Potter kids. But I guess that's
a teacher.
Normal. What's that?
Wasn't she a teacher in that?
No, she was one of the Death Eaters. She's one of the bad guys.
Well, yeah,
so that doesn't really.
I mean, having a crush on an older actor that's like just in the same thing is one thing, but like having a crush on an older actor,
it has to be a parent.
Who is your parent? Yeah, or sibling. No, parent. Sorry, parent.
Jesus. Maureen had guest roles on I Dream of Jeannie, Honey West, The Farmer's Daughter, and My Three Sons. Shockingly, none of those are porn. Prior to getting cast on Brady Bunch. But to me, but to Jordan, her biggest role was the voice of the Chatty Cathy doll.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
The second version of it. The one from the late 60s with the non-movable eyes. Ask your mom.
Oh, of course. The rebooted one. Yeah. She'd also appear... You're not a Chatty Cathy purist. McCormick also appeared in a TV ad for the doll before she was cast as the voice of it. Are you cast for the voice of a doll? Another child who was involved with that commercial was Eve Plum, who would play Jan Brady. So there's another weird doll connection. But the most infamous TV moment with Maureen McCormick occurred in the season 4 episode called The Subject Was Noses, which is, of course, yes, the legendary scene where she gets hit in the nose with a football. The professional that she was, she actually got hit in the face with a football. Christopher Knight, Peter Brady, was supposed to throw the ball in the show, but he had a hard time actually hitting her. So Sherwood Schwartz stepped in and gamely railed the teen actress directly in the face with a tight spiral. Phrasing. He reused the nose bit from a Gilligan's Island episode.
Yeah, maybe he has like a Tarantino-esque thing for swollen noses.
Yeah, in the episode A Nose by Any Other Name, Gilligan's nose swells up when he falls out of a tree. Did the guy who played Gilligan have a coke problem?
Bob Denver? I think he was a huge pothead. I think he got like busted a few times.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. But unlike her annoyingly perfect goody-goody sitcom character, McCormick had a rebellious streak. Susan Olsen tells the story of Maureen going shoplifting with Susan Cowsill of the Cowsills, the real-life family band who inspired the Partridge Family. And then after the show ended, McCormick fell into the sadly now familiar ex-child star trap of drug binges at the Playboy Mansion and Sammy Davis Jr.'s house. Is that real?
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's not part of the ex-child star cliche, that Sammy Davis Jr.'s house is a little more specific. But yeah, no, it was real.
Wow. No, I mean, I knew the Playboy Mansion. I assumed the Playboy Mansion thing. I didn't realize that Sammy Davis Jr.'s house was a den of iniquity. I should have assumed.
Yeah.
Yeah. As she wrote in her memoir, Jesus Christ, they would call me the Hoover because of how much cocaine I would do. If there was coke, I had to stay up and do every last flake, even if it meant going without sleep for days. Nothing else mattered. Her illness began to impact her career. She reportedly stayed awake for 3 days prior to auditioning for the role of Marion Ravenwood in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark with Steven Spielberg. And it went so badly that Spielberg just gave her an orange and sent her home.
I don't really understand what the orange was about. I think he thought that she had the flu and was
She was
sick.
sniffling and looked pale.
Yeah. I was like, oh, you need some vitamin C. Here, take this from this edible arrangement that Harrison Ford just sent me.
Maureen married fellow actor Michael Cummings in 1985, underwent a series of therapies for her addiction and depression, including treatment with the controversial therapist Eugene Landy, who treated and or abused Brian Wilson in the 70s and 80s. She has since regained her health and is reportedly very happy.
Well, Marcia and Greg weren't the only Brady kids to have a love connection. Cindy and Bobby, or Susan Olsen and Mike Lookinland, also had a crush on each other on the set, and they used to sneak into their dead dog Tiger's doghouse on the set to make out as 9-year-olds, which is somewhere between gothic and adorable.
Jesus Christ. That's a little young, even for the 70s.
Yeah.
Even for LA.
Susan Olsen admitted, these are quotes from her, with admirable frankness, that all the kids hooked up at one point. She said, quote, I think all of us did. We led a sheltered life for part of the year, so if there was anybody to get a crush on or try to date, it would be our counterparts on the show.
In the age brackets?
Yeah. But then,
Okay.
then as they got a little older, they
started trading up and down.
Bobby started to get a crush on Jan when everybody started getting a little older. And he would later accuse Eve Plum of stealing Bobby, Mike Lookinland, away from her. And they had a fake marriage, Bobby and Cindy, to I almost said consummate. They did not. What am I trying to say? To make their child love. No. They had a fake marriage just on the set, and when Bobby started to get a crush on Jan, they had it annulled, or they had a fake divorce, which they just assumed was just doing their wedding ceremony in reverse. So that's they did. Yeah, but they all remained close, and Susan Olsen named her firstborn son Mike in his honor, which is sweet.
Who am I named after? My TV brother, who I used to kiss in our dead dog's house. Aw. Oh, God, it gets weirder.
Yeah, Bobby and Cindy, the youngest Brady siblings, also star in what I believe to be the only band scene in Brady Bunch history, and it's a pseudo-nude scene. A robe-clad Bobby and Cindy enter the kitchen to tell Alice, the housekeeper, that they're going swimming at a neighbor's pool. A doctor, which to me adds a whole other creepy element to this. Alice, for reasons that I don't fully understand, opens Bobby's robe to see what swimming trunks he's wearing, which, again, weird, and discovers that, quote, as she says, he's wearing his birthday suit and not his swimsuit. Alice then checks Cindy and discovers the same thing, prompting her to quip, who's moved in over there, Adam and Eve? And for whatever reason that I didn't watch this full episode, so I don't really understand, the kids are hell-bent on going over to this pool naked, saying, quote, Dr. Belfield says the sun has lots of vitamins, to which Alice replies, so does orange juice, but you don't go swimming in it. She eventually forbids them from going over, saying that she won't allow any of the Brady kids to, quote, some X-rated party in their birthday suit. Weird. And another weird thing, I guess the older sisters on the show didn't like wearing bras, and so a producer would sneak up behind them and feel their backs to make sure they were, quote, properly dressed. This is according to Barry Williams' memoir. Rude and weird. Being a girl coming of age on this show seems like hell.
Okay.
Yes. Let's talk about Bobby for a little bit. Let's talk about our buddy Bobby. Mike Lukenland is the man who played him, and he was up for two different sitcom roles in 1968, The Brady Bunch and also The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which is based on a popular early 60s movie. And his parents decided that The Brady Bunch might be a better fit for him since he'd be around other kids. It was just one kid on The Courtship of Eddie's Father. And he was the last of the 9 regulars to be cast. And after accepting the role, he recalls being, quote, led into a room full of people, and someone, most likely Sherwood Schwartz, said, Mike, this is your new family. Heavy. I didn't realize this, but he also went on to provide the voice of Oblio in the 1971 animated film The Point, based on the songs of Harry Nilsson, which I love very much. I love that album. He also appeared in the 1974 blockbuster The Towering Inferno with Paul Newman, Steve McQueen, O.J. Simpson, making the connection between the Brady Bunch and O.J. 1 degree. And also the 1970s TV show The Secrets of Isis, which was not about what I thought it was about when I Googled it. My favorite story about Mike Lukenland's post-Brady career is that when the network tried to get him back to appear in the mid-70s variety show disaster, The Brady Bunch Hour, more on that later, he asked for double the salary in hopes that he would be recast. Instead, they actually gave in, resulting in double the salaries for the entire cast, which probably made him very popular, but he was presumably not very happy about having to do the show. He's also a massive Deadhead and reportedly saw the Grateful Dead in concert over 100 times. And sadly, like several of his Brady compatriots, he struggled with substance abuse issues. In 1997, he received a DUI after rolling his car several times off the road. His blood alcohol level was 3 times over the legal limit in the state of Utah, where he was living at the time. And understandably, he cited this as a wake-up call to stop drinking. He later said in an interview with Oprah, "The problem for me was I lived my childhood in my 20s. You should really try to live your childhood when you're a child, because if you do it when you're 26, it can be dangerous." And for a number of years, he actually retired from the film industry altogether and made a living making concrete countertops. But in 2021, he returned to the world of acting in the Lifetime Christmas movie Blending Christmas, alongside fellow Brady Bunch stars Barry Williams, who played Greg, Christopher Knight, who played Peter, Susan Olsen, who played Cindy, and Robbie Reist, who played Cousin Oliver, who we'll get to later. And another favorite story about Mike Lukenland is that in the 2000 made-for-TV movie Growing Up Brady, based on Barry Williams' memoir, Mike Lukenland was played by his own son, Scott, which I think is cute. I tried to find a list of other famous people who were portrayed by their offspring in movies, and I stopped because this is 23 pages long. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more Too Much Information in just a moment. And now we're going to talk about my favorite member of the Brady Bunch, Jan. I've always had a crush on Jan. In real life, I'm dating the sensitive middle child, so maybe I always just had a type.
Aw.
Just as the other corresponding siblings paired off, Eve Plum and Christopher Knight had a brief romantic interlude, though I've seen 2 versions of it. One version is that they were making out in a prop car on a quiet corner of the Paramount backlot when a security guard came by and caught them, which left Eve Plum mortified. And the more frequent version I've seen is that after the show was canceled in 1974, she and Christopher Knight, who played Peter, they're again the corresponding middle siblings, parked under the stars in his flatbed pickup truck with blankets, candles, and a 6-pack, only to be interrupted by cops because they were underage. Either way, in both versions, their moment was interrupted, tears resulted, and the magic was kind of over. And I don't think their relationship progressed further than that. Arguably, the 2 most famous catchphrases linked with the Brady Bunch are associated with Jan. First and foremost, an exasperated pouty. Can you do it?
No.
Marsha, Marsha, Marsha.
Yeah. I remember it, but I mean, not it happening. But I remember this being like the thing about the show.
Yeah.
I forgot about Sure Jan too.
Well, okay. Well, starting with the Marsha, surprisingly, given the enduring legacy of this phrase, it was only used once in the series, but it gained more popularity on Saturday Night Live when comedian Melanie Hutzel used the line in her impression of Jan for the show's Brady Bunch parody in the 90s. But as you said, the other line most commonly associated with the Brady Bunch, to me at least, is "Sure, Jan," delivered with a withering side eye by Marsha. That line, I guess we kind of Mandela affected it. That wasn't actually from the show at all, but from the Brady Bunch movies in the 90s, delivered by Christine Taylor as Marsha. Given the relationship between the characters on the Brady Bunch, it's perhaps not surprising that friction existed between Eve Plum and Maureen McCormick in real life. Reportedly, it stretches back to their time on the show. This is interesting to me. Maureen McCormick was originally tapped to play Jan, but then Sherwood Schwartz adjusted the ages of the kids and made her the oldest. So maybe that got things off on a weird footing. An anonymous source told Radar Online in 2010 the problems between them go back decades. They've never liked each other. And there have been many events where Eve has said, "I'm not doing it if Maureen's doing it." Susan Olsen, their younger TV sister, echoed this in a 2015 interview with news.com.au. "They do not get along," she said. "I think it's kind of petty. From day one with these two, I've always been in the middle, and now it's at the point where there isn't even a desire to communicate through me. It's all really petty, but if your feelings get hurt when you're really young, some people carry it with them. Or maybe to them, moving on means moving away." But yeah, the origin of their feud remains murky. Some have speculated that it was something as simple as jealousy. Interestingly, given their reputations on the show, Maureen McCormick, who's often, portrayed as the glamorous older sister, has said in interviews that she always thought Eve Plum was much more glamorous and pretty than her. So yeah, could have just been childhood jealousy at the time. But in recent years, there's reportedly another reason why Eve Plum was pissed at Maureen McCormick. For years, Maureen insinuated in interviews that she and Eve Plum had an affair on the set of the show. Which is just everybody. It's everybody. The earliest reference to this that I could find was a 1997 interview that Maureen McCormick gave to an LA area radio host, saying that she developed a huge crush on Eve during the time on the show, saying, quote, "We had really good times together." Somehow this led the DJ to unsubtly ask whether they were, quote, "patty cake close or Ellen DeGeneres close." Ooh.
That's okay.
Yeah, I know. 1997. Maureen McCormick reportedly replied, "Yeah, we kissed." And her rep clarified the next day that she meant kissed on the cheek. And then, prior to the release of Maureen's memoir in 2008, a source in the National Enquirer claimed that she was going to admit to a full-blown affair with Eve in her book, which wasn't out yet at the time. And though the source of the rumor wasn't known, Maureen apparently teased it in the press a lot more to drum up buzz for the book. And apparently she overdid it because the publisher, HarperCollins, felt inclined to put out a statement verifying that there was no such story to be found in the book. But Maureen McCormick apparently kept referencing it. Then, in 2009, a planned Brady Bunch 40th anniversary reunion with Oprah Winfrey was canceled when Eve Plum declined to attend. And it's pretty much accepted that this was because of the beef between her and Maureen. And Maureen wrote on Fencast.com that, quote, "All of us said yes except one person, Eve Plum, who used to be my best friend, but now apparently wants to distance herself from the show, and most troubling, from me. I have no idea why, unless she's mad at the joke I made a few years ago that we'd had a lesbian love affair. I made the crack to be funny and for shock value. I'm sorry if she took offense." And also, she tried to laugh it off during an appearance on the Today Show. She said, "I was having fun. It was something I was joking with." And she didn't take it that way. "I've reached out to Eve. I've called her for years and I would never get a phone call back. Finally, after doing that for so long, I thought, she'll call me when she wants to, and hopefully she will." After all this news of their feud in the press, Eve Plum's agent tried to downplay it all by saying, quote, "No one from Oprah called about any reunion. We haven't turned down anything. There is no feud." Susan Olsen, a.k.a. Cindy, called BS on this, telling Fox News in 2016 that Eve was basically sick of Maureen implying that they'd had an affair whenever she had a project to push and wanted headlines. "I don't like there to be a rift in the family," Susan said. "I love them both, and this means whenever we get together for any project, there will only be one or the other of them. But I do understand Eve's point of view. She got tired of Maureen gaining attention for herself by regurgitating the tiresome and false insinuations that they had a lesbian affair." However, Eve and Maureen, aka Marcia and Jan, reunited in 2019 for the HGTV series A Very Brady Renovation, which we'll talk about a little later, during which they renovated the real-life Brady Bunch house in Studio City to resemble the Brady interiors built on the Paramount soundstage. And during press for this show, one intrepid reporter asked Eve Plum if there had been a, quote, remedy to her alleged feud with Maureen McCormick. And Eve responded with a laugh. People like to say things. There was no remedy needed. Sure, Jan. And now for an Eve Plum grab bag of random facts that I really can't fit anywhere else. Oh, we touched on this at the top of the episode. In 1973, when she was still on the Brady Bunch, Eve Plum auditioned for the part of Reagan in The Exorcist, later played by Linda Blair, which is, I can't tell if it's just as weird or even weirder as Maureen McCormick starring in Raiders of the Lost Ark. What do you think? What's weirder?
This one.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing like Jan Brady's head spin 360 degrees with pea soup spewing out.
Or the crucifix thing.
Yeah. No. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good call. Cool.
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. But yeah, Eve Plum was clearly very ready for her stint on family television to be over. There's a possibly apocryphal story, but I really desperately want it to be true about her being asked to name her favorite episode of The Brady Bunch. And her response, the last one. Yeah, Eve Plum has a reputation of being the most over it and slightly bitter of all the Brady kids. And I think that reputation stems from the fact that she was the only one to decline to appear in the 1976 variety show spinoff, The Brady Bunch Hour, which was a terrible idea and lasted just 9 episodes. She was replaced by a woman named Jerry Rachel, who is forevermore known as, quote, Fake Jan. In Brady Bunch circles, Fake Jan, mention Fake Jan, you'll get a big response. You'll get a very big reaction. But all 3 of the Brady sisters have bailed on one spinoff or another. Susan Olsen didn't appear in the 1988 made-for-TV movie A Very Brady Christmas because shooting apparently took place during her honeymoon, which I kind of call BS on, but sure. And Maria McCormick declined to appear in the aforementioned short-lived 1990 dramedy series, The Bradys. So every Brady sister gets a pass. You get to skip one ill-advised Brady spin-off series, one apiece. But getting back to Jan, she was the most successful at shaking her goody two-shoes Brady rep. Just after graduating high school in 1976, she played a teen prostitute in Dawn, Portrait of a Teenage Runaway. And she apparently has quite the gift for real estate investing. In 1969, at the age of 11, she purchased a Malibu beach bungalow for $55,000. And she sold the house in 2016 for $3.9 million.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I'm guessing that was purchased with her Brady Bunch bucks, but maybe not, because apparently they didn't earn that much on the show. Bear Williams said that the kids got paid a maximum of $1,110 a week during the show's run. And Susan Olsen said that they also had to pay for their own parking on the studio lot during the first season.
That's rough.
Yeah, I know. And also the syndication contracts were garbage. So Brady Bunch kids, we give you a C- in the TMI School of Business.
Well, on to the inanimate objects portion of the podcast. You will be sad to learn that the Brady Bunch house neither had a coke habit nor slept with its sibling.
Or parent.
But the actual Brady house, used for exterior shots throughout the show, is a charming little split level located in Studio City, California. It gets great westward-facing light. We don't want to give out the address here, but you can find it. Supposedly, the fictitious address is 4222 Clinton Way. Show creator Sherwood Schwartz chose the home himself because he felt like it was the kind of stylish, modern home that an architect, which is, of course, Mike Brady's fictional profession, would live in. He said, "We didn't want it to be too affluent. We didn't want it to be too blue-collar. There was only one problem. It was a split level, but the sets being built back at Paramount Studio Stage 5 were for a 2-story building. Ultimately, Hollywood set designers stuck a phony window onto the exterior of the real house to create the illusion that it was 2 stories. And as is so often the case, the owners of the famous home found that the notoriety was somewhat annoying. A future owner built a fence around the yard to keep overzealous fans from peeking in at all hours of the day and night. And by the time production began on the 2 Brady Bunch movies in 1995, the owners declined to give permission to shoot at the famous house, forcing producers to build a facade around another home with a similar yard. The interiors of the home on the Paramount lot were recycled for other shows, furniture and all, once for the show Mission Impossible, twice on the detective series Mannix.
It's so weird. You see Peter Graves in Mission Impossible just strolling through the Brady's living room like it's totally normal.
And Robert Reed had a recurring guest role on Mannix. He played the part of Lieutenant Adam Tobias for 22 episodes. Sadly, we never got that Brady Bunch Mannix crossover series or Brady Bunch Jake and the Fat Man. The home had some quirks to it, par for the course for a medium quality sitcom in the late 60s. The sliding glass door in the backyard, for example, had no glass in it to reduce any kind of reflective glare. In the episode where the kids break their mom's favorite vase, there are a few quick shots that reveal the home has no ceiling, just studio lights. These are all errors that would seem less of a big deal before a freeze frame was such a thing. Perhaps most notably and famously, the Jack and Jill bathroom shared by the 6 Brady kids doesn't have a toilet, leading to the joke that the Brady kids were so wholesome that they don't even go to the bathroom. This was not an oversight. Network standards of the time refused to allow a toilet bowl to be shown on TV before 10 p.m. Leave It to Beaver had gotten away with it for one episode in 1957 just by showing the tank portion. And Eve Plum later said, at the time, the idea was that it was just sort of tacky to be showing toilets on TV. Nowadays, everybody's on the toilet. Sure, Jan. When the Very Brady renovation show began, in which they renovated a real-life house to look like the set of the Bradys, why?
I thought it was going to be used as, well, first of all, ratings, but I also assumed that they would turn it into a tourist trap or something, but apparently that has not happened yet. We'll talk more about that later, but I actually was looking into it because I would love to go tour the Brady's house.
Of course you would. Anyway, in this show, the Brady kids' bathroom finally got a toilet, which...
It's a phrase I don't think I'd ever, you bet you never thought you'd say.
Nor would I have ever thought that I would say the phrase, and it was Marcia herself who christened it. I have to say, I have used it now, she said, and it was good.
Is that what God said when God created?
Yeah. Also, at long last, Alice was given a bathroom in her maid's quarters. On to another inanimate object in the show, Cousin Oliver.
Oh.
You stopped watching this before. Was this aired sequentially? How would you have... What are you talking about? You never saw it.
Honestly, if I started watching it and the older Brady boys had like curly hair, I tended to change the channel. I didn't like the later years on the Brady Bunch. Yeah.
Because of the curly hair thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like the later episodes of all shows are bad, except Breaking Bad.
Cousin Oliver has become something of a shorthand for characters shoehorned into a TV show when it's on its last legs. In other words, fresh blood in a desperate attempt to boost ratings. Sort of the human equivalent of the shark that Fonzie jumps over in Happy Days, giving rise to that phrase. How many different shows did they do this on?
Quite a few. They did it on The Partridge Family, and later on Different Strokes when they cast Danny Cooksey, who is most familiar to me as Bobby Budnick on Salute Your Shorts. I didn't know he had a life before Salute Your Shorts. Or I knew he had a life. I knew he didn't. Wasn't grown on a Nickelodeon lab, but like I didn't know.
All I can think of is Roy in The Simpsons. See you later, Mr. S. Yeah, hi, Roy.
Or Leon from Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, Cousin Oliver was played by Robbie Rist. And he was Carol Brady's nephew, came to live with the Bradys while their parents were out of the country. On the surface, it made sense. You introduce a new character to offset the fact that the cast were starting to age. But fans did not dig it. On Barry Williams' blog, The Greg Brady Project... Jesus. Why you make me... On Barry Williams' blog, The Greg Brady Project, he responded to a fan question about how the cast received Robbie Rist into their midst. That was a hell of a tongue twister. I'm going to take that whole thing over again.
Nicely done. Wow.
I'm just adopting the like Casey Kasem cadence the longer the show runs. Jordan, you son of a bitch. Robbie came into a tough situation. The writers were floundering, and he introduced a very different type of humor into our show. Also, we had been together a long time, and we really didn't have time to adjust to a new, quote, family member.
Ouch.
His quotes, not mine.
Oh, I know.
I haven't had much contact with him, but I'm sure he is a nice guy, and I certainly wish him every success. I'm sure he's a nice guy. He was, after all, on the show for just 6 episodes before ABC killed it before the 6th season, leading many to conclude that Cousin Oliver was responsible for the death of the Brady Bunch. And then, in the second such instance of this pipeline, Rob Erist joined the Mary Tyler Moore Show in that show's 6th season as Ted and Georgette's adopted son, David, and the show lasted just 1 season after that, leading some to accuse him of killing that show too. Thankfully, he has a good sense of humor about it. Years later, Rist appeared with members of the Brady Bunch cast on a special Brady reunion charity episode of the game show The Weakest Link. Introducing himself, he joked, "I hope I don't kill this show too." He ended up being the weakest link of the episode and was eliminated by the other contestants.
I guess they just didn't want to chance it. And this brings us to a section of the show that I like to call a very Brady cancellation. It's important to note that the Brady Bunch was never really a massive hit during its initial run between September 1969 and March 1974. In fact, it never even cracked the top 30 in the Nielsen ratings, though it was popular enough that Henry Kissinger paid a visit to the set. Photos were taken, and I love that. Please look it up. Yeah. And then, of course, they had guest stars like Joe Namath and Davy Jones, the latter of whom accompanied Maureen McCormick to her prom, which I love. According to Ann B. Davis, who played Alice, and who later, after the Brady Bunch went off the air, sold her home in L.A. and joined a religious commune in Colorado, the Brady Bunch ratings were so low throughout its run that it was renewed for just 13 episodes or half a season at a time until the very last season. They couldn't get the network to commit to a full season until several years into its run. I love that. Kids love the Brady Bunch because it was generally told from a child's point of view, but adults never really connected with it, which is part of the reason why it didn't really thrive in prime time. And then when NBC put the edgy contemporary Sanford and Son opposite it, it just blew the Brady Bunch right out of the water and its ratings tanked. We discussed earlier how Sherwood Schwartz toured with the idea of killing off Mike Brady and having Carol go back to dating for a proposed 6th season. It's unclear how serious this was, given just how much he hated working with Robert Reed. There's another story that he was going to recast Mike Brady and have Carol become pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. But in any event, the show was not renewed for a 6th season, and the final episode aired on March 8th, 1974, very unceremoniously. The show was a hit, though, in syndication, much like Star Trek. The reruns that started running in September 1975 were scheduled in late afternoon, just after kids got home from school, which made it hugely popular with young viewers and their families. And by 1976, reruns of The Brady Bunch actually beat out the vice presidential debate in ratings. And at the time of its 30th anniversary in 1999, each of the 117 episodes was estimated to have aired more than 100,000 times around the world. And presumably that number has grown exponentially by the time of its 50th anniversary in 2019. Now, we got to get to the very Brady spinoffs. There are just so many media properties that they parlayed this show into. It's insane. Actually, first, before we get to the spinoffs, we have to talk about the very Brady music career, if you can call it that, in the early 70s. The Brady Bunch kids released 4 LPs, plus a Christopher Knight Maureen McCormick duets LP, which sounds like hell because Christopher Knight was, by his own admission, the only member of the cast who truly could not sing. Each of the Brady kids, except for Cindy, released solo singles, and they did versions of American Pie, the Badfinger song Day After Day, Love Me Do, Baby I'ma Want You by Bread, Saturday in the Park by Chicago, Summer Breeze by Seals and Crofts, and the Michael Jackson song Ben.
The one about the rats?
The one about the rat, yep. Mm-hmm.
I guess rat singular. That was, Wilbur was the one who had many rats. Right?
No, Wilbur from Charlotte's Web?
No, the twin dueling rat movies of the 70s.
I don't know Wilbur. What's Wilbur?
Oh, Wilbur's Willard. Sorry. Willard. Yeah, Willard had many rats. Ben just had the one.
Okay, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, do you have like a mnemonic for that? Like I before E except after C? Ben is just one. Willard is
many.
More fun. Yeah.
Yours is better.
But yeah, if you want to ruin any of those classic songs for yourself, have at it. Brady Bunch does versions of them. But getting back to the televisual realm, there was an animated series called
Ben had an army of rodents. So technically they both have many, many rats in them.
Okay. Oh, my mistake.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. You'll punch that in?
Punch that in post? Yeah.
Okay.
That in post. Okay, good.
Right, thanks.
Yeah. So if you want to ruin any of those classic songs...
They. I'm sorry. This is what boggles the mind. The poster for Ben actually says
Has a lot of rats.
Well, yeah, it sure does. But it says where Willard ended, Ben begins.
Are they related?
Oh, it's a sequel. How am I just now learning this? My God.
Wow. I'm glad we got this down.
Yeah. Wow. They put on the Jackson's Live album. God, Michael really loved that song. It's on the Jackson Live album. It's on his number ones. Well, it was a number one hit, but yeah.
That's on Michael Jackson's ones?
It hit number one. Won a Golden Globe. It was nominated for Best Original Song at the Oscars. I really genuinely didn't know that Ben was a sequel to Willard. I thought they were. That makes more sense that they're a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because here's a mnemonic for you. Ben is the name of the rat. Willard's the name of the guy.
Okay, doesn't rhyme, but okay.
No. I'll come back to it. I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you want to ruin
Do you
any
know
of
that
those
was produced by Bing Crosby's production company?
Wait, really?
Yeah. Bing Crosby Productions, responsible for Ben.
For the rat movies.
Well, I don't know about Willard.
Can you imagine him taking an ad out in trade papers like, Ben by Bing?
No, that was the signature scent. Ben by Bing. Oh God. Okay, I'm sorry.
He's the one who died on the golf course, right? He was like, "Yeah, I got 18 holes and like 76 strokes. I think that's a personal best. What do you say we take this over to the cabana?" And then he just like keeled over on the 18th green.
Did not know that.
I think so. Yeah.
Would have been better if a rat was involved.
Who's to say? I think he's the one that like was like really bad to his kids, like mommy dearest style.
Super. We whooped the shit out of him. Yeah. That was the Family Guy joke.
Right.
You can beat your kids with a sack of sweet Valencia oranges and it won't leave a bruise.
This is why we're friends. You have a Bing Crosby impression.
You really nailed that. Crosby, who had a 13 handicap, won with his partner by one stroke. At about 6:30 p.m., Crosby and his party headed back to the clubhouse. Crosby said, "That was a great game of golf, fellas. Let's go have a Coca-Cola." These were his last words. He collapsed and died 20 yards from the clubhouse entrance from a massive heart attack.
I know my mid-century.
Jesus Christ. All right, let's take this home. How many pages? Oh, thank God.
Oh, we're almost done, yeah.
The rat one was really bad. Really bad. Maybe the show's furthest reach.
I'm keeping it.
Just leave it. It's like the like oops all berries or whatever. It's oops too much information. Oops all tangents.
All rats. Back to the Brady Bunch televisual spinoffs. First off, we have the animated series The Brady Kids, which ran for 2 seasons between 1972 and 1973. And this was the era when every primetime show had a Saturday morning cartoon series. The Partridge Family had possibly my favorite, Partridge Family 2200 AD, which is like a Partridge Family Jetson combo. In fact, I think it was actually slated to be some kind of a Jetsons project, and then midway through, they just switched to midstream. There was also a Happy Days animated series called The Fawns and the Happy Days Gang. All in all, weird time for Saturday morning TV shows. But also in the mid-'70s, not only was it a golden era for weird Saturday morning kids animated series, but it was also a golden era for variety TV programming, which leads us to 1976's The Brady Bunch Hour, which is widely viewed as one of the worst programs in the history of the medium. The show was the brainchild of Michael Eisner, future Disney chief Michael Eisner, and kicked the idea to Sid and Marty Krofft, who were the puppeteer brothers who created these insane, acidy children's programs like Land of the Lost and H&R Puffin' And the show, The Brady Bunch Hour, was meant to follow in the footsteps of shows like Sonny and Cher's Comedy Hour or Donnie and Marie, which was just a combination of skits, disco music numbers featuring the Bradys, and guest stars like Vincent Price and Rip Taylor. It did not work out. There's even a book about the creation of this misbegotten show called Love to Love You Brady's, which presumably takes its title from a Donna Summer song that they butchered. The bizarre story of the Brady Bunch Variety Hour. And so, yeah, just the less said about it, the better. But I will say, Robert Reed, a.k.a. Mike Brady, the man who hated the entire Brady experience up to this point, had a wonderful time doing this show. He fancied himself a song and dance man. And if you watch clips from it, he's not very good at either, but he commits so much. And there's just so much raw joy coming from this man. It's really, really great. I love it so much. Then, after this misbegotten Brady Bunch variety show, in 1981, there was the made-for-TV movie The Brady Girls Get Married, in which Marcia and Jan have a joint wedding, which was notable as the final time that all 9 members of the original Brady Bunch cast were in an on-screen project together. And this was a backdoor pilot for a short-lived Brady Brides sitcom that lasted just 7 episodes. The two couples couldn't afford a house, which is very prescient, I must say, in 2023, and they decided to move in together. Marcia and her husband are more laid back, and Jan and her husband are more uptight. It's basically The Odd Couple meets the Brady Bunch, which is a better elevator pitch than it probably had. Sadly, it did not work out. And then there was a 1988 made-for-TV movie called A Very Brady Christmas, minus Susan Olsen, who was on her honeymoon. And that's where we start moving into the Brady dramedy phase. I think this made-for-TV movie was inspired by the show 30-something, which grappled with baby boomers growing up in the 80s. And they were trying to go a similar route with the Brady Bunch. Jan is separating from her husband. Bobby is dropping out of his graduate program to become a race car driver, and that ultimately leads to his car accident where he is paralyzed. Alice's relationship with Sam the Butcher is on the skids after he leaves her for another woman. All in all, just very sad Brady family. I'd like to quote the climax of A Very Brady Christmas directly from the Wikipedia page because I can't say it any better myself. The family's Christmas dinner is disrupted when Mike Brady learns that a ruthless businessman that he designed a building for, remember he's an architect, has cut corners, resulting in the building collapsing and trapping 2 security guards inside. Mike manages to free the trapped employees, but an aftershock results in Mike getting trapped in the rubble himself. In the end, Mike gets out of the debris after Carol and the entire family sings "O Come All Ye Faithful."
To save him? To summon him?
I don't know. I mean, this is like the nuclear option of jumping the shark. Like collapsing building, summoning the body from the rubble with a Christmas song. It's everything. It's just everything. But yeah, this was the backdoor pilot for the Brady series that aired in 1990, which we talked about earlier. Bobby becomes paralyzed. Marcia Brady, played by another actress who isn't Marie McCormick, struggles with alcoholism. Giant bummer. Realizing that America didn't care to see the serious side of the Bradys, we got the satirical movie reboot in 1995 with the sequel a year later. The lesser-known Brady Bunch in the White House made-for-TV movie that aired in 2002, which I'd never heard of. I can't imagine that it did well post 9/11. It probably went the way of That's My Bush and just kind of got like buried because no one really wanted political humor in that era. And my favorite part about all these Brady movies was that the producers went to Florence Henderson to make a cameo, and they offered her $5,000, which was like the SNL skit of Lorne Michaels offering the Beatles $3,000 to reunite on his show. She reportedly laughed in their faces. But then fans were, clamoring for a original OG Mrs. Brady cameo in these movies. So I guess the producers ponied up enough money and she made the cameo. In the early 2010s, Vince Vaughn, of all people, was working with Sherwood Schwartz to reboot the Brady Bunch series, but Schwartz died in 2011, and this idea never came to fruition. And to date, the last true Brady reunion was 2019's A Very Brady renovation on HGTV, which we touched on earlier. The project began when the home used for the exteriors of the Brady house was put on the market in August 2018 for the first time since 1973. The asking price? $1.88 million, which, given its history and the Airbnb potential, kind of seems like a bargain. A bidding war ensued with Lance Bass of NSYNC among the interested buyers. We really should have asked him to do a guest segment on this show. I'm really pissed. Damn it, because he's doing a couple iHeart shows, actually. But Lance said that he was, quote, heartbroken after he was outbid by HGTV, who picked up the property for almost twice the asking price, $3.5 million. can't be a corporation, my dude. I mean, he's had enough of his dreams come true. He went up to space in the Russian... didn't he go into the Russian space station or something? Yeah, I mean, you can't have it all. So yeah, the Bradys, in conjunction with the HGTV people, did a gut renovation of this house to transform it into an almost identical replica of the interiors filmed on the Paramount soundstage in the late 60s and early 70s, complete with vintage furniture, wood paneling, rotary phones, the whole bit. And the show, which sort of featured active help from the Brady kids, they probably just gave them like a hammer to swing or something, premiered on September 9th, 2019, which was almost exactly 50 years after the Brady Bunch premiered. And I'd like to quote from a piece by Lindsay Parker that she wrote for Yahoo Entertainment. From the leaky clay pot that was once shattered by the Brady boys' errant basketball to the kitty carryall doll reclining on Cindy's bed, from the beaded hippie curtains in Greg's attic bachelor pad to the vintage olive green appliances in the kitchen where Alice used to make her pork chops and applesauce and pineapple upside down cake, from the long missing family pet tiger's paisley curtained wooden doghouse to the iconic shag carpeted staircase, HGTV has spared absolutely no detail, spared no expense. Stepping through those blue doors and into the cobblestone walled entryway is like stepping into a groovy portal to 1969. However, there is one addition to the Brady home that isn't true to the original. There's finally, at long last, an actual running toilet in the Brady kids' shared Jack and Jill bathroom. And you know what, folks? If that's not a fitting ending to this episode, I don't know what is.
That show set an HGTV record. Over 28 million total viewers.
Oh, I'm sure. What? People love the Brady Bunch. And you know what? Getting a toilet in that house, in a way...
50-year plot hole closed.
In a way, that sums up the Brady Bunch. It's a kindler, gentler, warmer version of the past. One that never really existed. Nothing about the Brady Bunch represented a child's experience in the early 70s or ever. But it's the past the way we want to remember it, through rose-colored glasses and with a toilet. And, you know, that's part of the Brady Bunch's enduring power. Watching the Brady Bunch as an adult, it reminds me of this line from Nick Hornby's book High Fidelity, in which his music snob main character waxes poetic about listening to something as horrifically mainstream as the Beatles. The Beatles, he says, belonged to him, having made its mark on him back when his life was small and contained enough for that to be possible. He says, though the Beatles make me feel something, they won't make me feel anything bad. And I think that's what the Brady Bunch is for so many people. And I think that there's tremendous value in that. So for all the bad hair, implausible plot lines, and characters behaving in ways that bear absolutely no resemblance to reality whatsoever, I say God bless the Brady Bunch. Did I hit you with the heart?
That's a great kicker. I got nothing
Thank
to
you.
add to that. Well done. Yeah, man. Folks, thank you for listening. This has been Too Much Information. Oops, all digressions. I'm Alex Heigl.
And I'm Jordan Runtagh. We'll catch you next time. Too Much Information was a production of iHeart Radio.
The show's executive producers are Noel Brown and Jordan Runtagh.
The show's supervising producer is Michael Alder June.
The show was researched, written, and hosted by Jordan Runtagh and Alex Heigl.
With original music by Seth Applebaum and the Ghost Funk Orchestra. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. For more podcasts on iHeart Radio, visit the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.